Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to have you here for the St. Hilda's Wisdom Series, session number 2, when we're talking about wisdom in many traditions, the wisdom found through meditation and spirituality. We've got about a dozen people here physically in the church, and we have a number, I don't know how, I can't tell from here how many are on Zoom, but we've had really good attendance. And so it's very encouraging to see this kind of series be able to be done in so many different ways now. My name is Bruce Morris. I'm the deacon here at St. Hilda's. And with me is Steve Black, who is the rector. He's the guy behind the Zoom control machine doing the technical stuff. I'd like to introduce the speakers that we have tonight. We've got 5 panelists, and my goodness, what a depth of experience and skills we have. So right sitting here with me in the church is Marlena Blavin, who has an organization called Body Revelations. She's a lifelong student of the interface between mind and body, and practices consistently spiritual practices of reflection and meditation, particularly transcendental meditation. Marlena and her husband David, who's also here today, live jointly between Roberts Creek and, for those of you who aren't from here, that's just 3 miles down the road, and Mill Valley, California, which is a bit further. Also tonight, Terry Coyote Aleck. Terry is a residential school survivor, attended St. George's Residential School in Lytton. He has been actively engaged in reconciliation work in many areas of society. Terry is currently the Indigenous Teacher in Residence here at St. Hilda's, and he holds the Order of the Diocese of New Westminster, which is an honor given to those who have contributed in very significant ways to the enhancement of church in this area. He was personally nominated by a former Archbishop of ours, Archbishop Sechelt, to recognize the many years he walked with the church on the path of healing, truth-telling, and reconciliation on the national level and local level. Coming to us from Barbados is the Reverend Dr. Michael Clark. Michael is the principal of Codrington College and has been for quite a few years. Codrington College is the oldest seminary in the Western Hemisphere. So Vancouver School of Theology, which was the one that Steve and I went to, is just brand spanking new compared with Codrington. So it's wonderful to have Michael here, and we won't keep you too late, Michael, as we know you're 2 hours ahead of us in time, I think. 9 o'clock your time. We have Shinmon Michael Newton, who is a Soto Zen Buddhist priest, now retired from teaching Asian studies and religious studies at Simon Fraser University, but he is committed to supporting Mountain Rain Zen community as a community that practices in the context of the wider community, the arts, and the natural world. Michael was with us last week as well, and we're wonderful to have him back with us. And fifth, not least, Archbishop Lynn McNaughton, who is the current Bishop of Kootenay, which is an Anglican diocese in the interior of the province, and the current Metropolitan of the province of British Columbia, which why she has the title of Archbishop. Lynn used to be from this diocese. She has led many pilgrimages and retreats, and she used to teach Christian spirituality and other topics, including women mystics at the Vancouver School of Theology here in Vancouver. So great to have the 5 of you with us. It's a great delight. So I think that we'll draw attention to the donations that we're asking people to contribute to this series, which will allow us to continue this and also to do more of this type of event in the future. So the guidelines are in the handouts and the emails that you've been receiving. So thank you for those of you who have contributed, and that'll allow us to do much more stuff. I think on that basis, we should hand it over to you, Marlena. And what we're going to do is each presenter will present for, I think we've asked them to do 12 or so minutes. Sometimes that works, and sometimes we need a bit more. At the end of those, the 5 panelists can ask each other questions for a few minutes, And then we'll invite it up to people who are physically here in the church and those at home in Zoom to ask questions to specific presenters or to the five as a group.
Okay.
Over
Ready?
to you.
What an honor to be here. 53 years ago, in 1970, I was 21, trying to arrive into my adulthood. And it was a very, very tough time for me, as it is for some 21-year-olds. I was really hitting a bottom. I heard people in the foreground, background talking about meditation. Like, what is meditation? I was living in Chicago at the time, that's where I'm born. And I got a curiosity about it, just tweaked my brain a little bit. I walked into some bookstore and there was a poster of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, long hair, white robes, saying that there was going to be a lecture at Northwestern University explaining this simple, easy technique to learn to meditate and learn how to use more of your human potential. Well, my body became like electrified. You know, when your soul tells you, do it. So I went to the lecture and I knew I had to do it. Okay. When I got initiated, so they said, you are going to be given a sound that is so pleasing to the nervous system, but you won't know what it means. And then we will teach you how to use this sound very effortlessly. It's easy and simple. Those are the three things when I think of transcendental meditation: easy, effortless, simple. It's so natural, the teacher said. It's just like brushing your teeth. It's just like going to sleep at night. There's nothing that you have to do that's different than your ordinary life. You can sit in a chair, be comfortable. You can scratch yourself if you get an itch while you're meditating, because I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to have to sit really still like this, and I can't move. I'll never be able to do that. Are you kidding? A 21-year-old who's restless, sit in one place for 20 minutes twice a day? I don't think so. He said, no. This is so easy. It's natural. We're meant to be able to get quiet. The mind, they say it's a monkey mind, but really what the mind likes to do is go to things that are pleasing. It naturally goes towards things that are pleasing. He said, have you ever been at a party and you're talking with someone, and the conversation is not getting to be so interesting and you're starting to get restless? And then I'm an eavesdropper. So all of a sudden you hear this conversation like someone's talking about a trip that they went to, and your whole mind just goes like that. And you're totally captivated by what they're saying, and you're not listening to what's happening here. Or a book that you start to read. Oh, I don't know if I like that one. And then all of a sudden you pick up another book and you're totally involved. He said, that's how the mind works. It's always going towards something more pleasing. So that's what we do in this technique. We give you this sound. It's a Vedic, it comes from the Vedic tradition in India. And these sounds are like 5,000 years old. This technique comes from a very old tradition where people in deep meditation, that these sounds naturally came to them. Well, I'm a dancer. I use my hands to do hands-on healing work. So sound is really a place where I resonate. So I like that idea of having a sound that was so pleasing to your nervous system that your mind will want to go to it naturally. So even if it wanders, he said, and you find yourself thinking about your gotta do this, and I gotta do that. Oh, and I'm late for this. And if I don't do that, that's fine, because thoughts are no barrier to meditation. They're part of the meditation. You just come back so easily and effortlessly to this sound, And because you don't have a meaning, there's no intellectualization. You're not trying to control it in anywhere. Your mind will just start settling. And then as it starts to go quieter and quieter, oh, this gets more and more pleasurable. I didn't know if I really believed this when I heard the lecture. But I was a scuba diver. So he used an ocean analogy that the mind, when it's in its active state, is like it's like waves, it's really big. You could have tsunami waves up here. But when you go underneath in the ocean, you go deeper, maybe you go down to 30, 40 feet. Now, I had done that with scuba diving. Things get quiet, even though you're moving around and you're thinking, oh, there's this quietness. And I've actually gone down 130 feet. And when I got down to the ocean down there, it was still. No waves, nothing. And he said, that's the source of life. That's the stillness place where everything comes from. And I thought, even though I'm Jewish, I love Jesus. And I used to read some biblical things and I thought, oh, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven lies within. I never knew what that meant. I thought maybe this is what he's talking about. Okay. So we go through this initiation. It's very easy. And the teacher, you learn with a teacher, and you get this 3 days of instruction to make sure that you really know how to do this. And you have all these questions about thoughts. And so we do a little ritual to say thank you to Maharishi's teacher, who is from India. And Maharishi's from India. He's a physicist. He was very much into science. His teacher, he learned by this oral tradition the same way that I was going to learn. And when his teacher died, he went into the mountains for 2 years into silence and deeply, deeply entrenched himself deeper, what I think, at the bottom of the ocean. And it came to him, why shouldn't everybody have this? Why should it just be exclusive for just a few little religions here and there? So he was intuitively drawn to come to the West. And in 1958, he started teaching this all over the world. He went around the world 7 times to teach this technique. Oh boy. So I got my mantra, this meaningless sound. Who cares what it means? My mind couldn't intellectualize or not anything. And I started to think it so easily. Oh, am I doing it right? Oh, maybe I'm not. Oh, forget that. Doesn't matter if you're thinking. I just thought it like, I'll use a fake word now, po, 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 po. And then it got quieter. And all of a sudden, everything changed for me. My whole perceptual world changed in this first meditation. The room became so big, and I felt like a part of me was expanding into this room. And my hands, as I touched them, became so different that I could actually feel every knuckle, which is what I would do with people when I would massage them. Sounds like there was music going on somewhere down the street, because this was a hotel where we learned these. And all of a sudden, it was like the sound of that music. I felt like I could feel that guitar inside my body. Wow. I had never experienced anything like that before. And I did drugs too, but this was different. I want more of this. So we did the 3 days, and it continued and it deepened. And all I knew was that by diving around in that ocean, really deep like that, I was compelled to go and study this. I drove all the way from Chicago to San Francisco to see Maharishi for a month in 1971. And then I went to Spain and became a teacher of Transcendental Meditation. And it completely changed my life. My whole 20s, all I did was spend in diving down into this ocean. And it's so easy that when I do contemplative prayer now, so TM, somebody described it like if you're going to charge your phone up, maybe you want to charge your cell phone up, you just take your phone, charge it, put it in the wall. Well, when I meditate, it's just like that. You can be critic, you can be critical, you can be a skeptic. You don't have to even believe in it, and it works. My father in 1970, a Jewish middle-aged man, 45 years old, I told him how great this was. He said, okay, I'll try it. He's nothing, no spirituality, nothing with him. He had the same experiences as me. So he meditated till he died in his 70s, and he would do it on the Chicago subway. He did it going downtown to Chicago on the subway to work and on the way back. It totally relaxed him, and I think it really gave him more years of his life. So you can see I'm a fan. And I'll just end with 53 years later. Maurice used to say, when you meditate, it's like dyeing a white cloth. Every time you go into that deeper parts of yourself, which is who you are, which is the kingdom within that Jesus was talking about, something stays on that cloth, a little bit of the color. And then before you know it, that white cloth becomes this color. Maybe it's ochre, maybe it's red. And more you live in that state that the Rig Veda says, established in being, perform action. Established in stillness, perform action. And I am a hospice volunteer at the Sunshine Coast Hospice. I love it. And I have the ability, and I know it's because I meditate, to sit with people when they're dying. I have sat with someone once for 10 hours because they become my mantra. They become my being. My system knows how to settle. I might close my eyes and I'm with them. And I go to that time, you know, the timeless place where it does you, or the zone, they say. That's what it feels like. Not always. Sometimes I have a real restless one. I might only go 10 feet, but it doesn't matter. My nervous system still gets infused with that rest. My mind, body, brain, I have less cortisol. You're in an alpha state, all that stuff you know about. So I could meditate any place. I think I'll do it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlena. I'm taken by the sense of peace that comes from your description of the practice and the value of that in this time of hectic life and worries and stresses. And that peace is a real gift.
Oh, it's definitely. I don't know what I would do without this technique. And I do contemplative prayer. I know I get very excited, but I'm going to tell you this prayer because contemplative prayer is like you use words, you use a visual to bring in that feeling. So I meditate, I do don't think anything, you know, and then I have this prayer that's in my body. It's like, I thank thee, O Lord, for thy divine presence as the infinite silence out of which arises my existence. And that to me is the key to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, next, we're going to hear from Coyote Terry Aleck. And Terry is a medicine man who brings his sense of spirituality from his practices as a First Nations healer, therapist, and friend. So, Terry, let's hear from you.
She's a hard act to follow. Women in my teachings have so much to pass on. I thank you for your teachings there about meditation. Got me thinking about my own meditation in life, and I didn't learn about it until I was 30 years old, how to calm the spirit, how to calm my monkey mind, how to be at peace with my surroundings. And my surroundings were in the mountains. That's where my elders and medicine people took me when I sobered up. They said, you need to do ceremonies before we can pass any teachings on to you. So this vision quest you're going to be doing is for a name. And It's in total silence. You no talking to nobody, nothing. No food, no water. And I'm looking at my elders. Okay, that's a lot to ask for somebody that's just first learning how to crawl. And my elders had humor galore. They taught me with so much humility, with so much on point teachings that, there was no way I could trip this one up. And the crux of that story was my elders had my name on that first half day, and they knew that my name was going to be, in my language, Shinkayap, coyote, because the coyote showed up to my medicine man, my great uncle, who was the medicine man, last of them, showed up in his backyard, and right away he knew. He goes, that's who he is, Shinkayap. Shinkayap in our folklore was a creator's right-hand man, not only been a trickster, but also a truth bearer. But my elders, they talked to each other that first half day, and they said, Shinkayap, Shinkayap, Shinkayap. So he called all the elders and said, Shinkayap, coyote, that's who he is. But we'll leave him out there for the 4 days anyway, so he can experience what it's like to have a vision quest and to fast with no food and no water. And that was the beginning of many, many vision quests, many, many medicine journeys with many, many medicine men from up and down North America and South America. And I really soaked in as much as I could from my surroundings. I listened to the water, watched the little ants play, carry their food back home. I watched the birds come and go and sing, and watched the bear walk by me and said, wow, you're a pretty brave bear. And a deer, it's just because I was at peace. They said when you're out there in the wilderness and you want to be one with nature, be one with nature. No words, no songs, just be. And the answers will come to you in spirit form, whether it's with those little ants or the birds or the bear or the deer, or even a coyote that showed up on my great uncle's yard. Many, many teachings like that came to me. And just by sacrificing my time, the longest I did was 10 days, a 10-day fast out in Mount Curry way, just because I wanted to feel it. Okay, Jesus did this for 40 days. What's 10 days, without food and water? And, it was a challenge, but it was something that I wanted to feel, because people were going to be asking for help and guidance with this journey along the way. And I knew that, as my elders were saying, there's going to be so many people reaching out to you. Help me. I need to go on a vision quest. And sure enough, even some of the elders that put me out there, one was 84, and she said, nephew, I've never done a vision quest ever. I'm 84 and I'm asking you, can you put me out? And I'm looking at my elder. I said, you're the one that's supposed to be teaching me. And she goes, no. She goes, I'm a baby to this spiritual work. You already have grown leaps and bounds just from the moments that you sobered up to now you're taking me out to the wilderness, and what do I have to do? And so I'm teaching my own elders on a vision quest and how to be at peace out there. And I said, whatever comes to you, just say thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's what I was taught. They said, as soon as you open your eyes in the morning, say thank you. You have another day of life, another day of doing something wonderful, or another day of helping to lift somebody's spirit, or or another day of teaching and sharing, or another day of, hey, there's a new song I want to share. And, that excitement is at the surface all the time. It's like, okay, I'm going back to work to Clayton's tomorrow. What kind of mischief can I get into at work, And who's going to stop by and talk to me, and who wants to learn more? And so I keep my book open, meaning my spirit. And I close down when I know I need to. And right now I'm wide open because I'm home. I got my beautiful bird there singing with me. And, it's just, my journey has taken me through hell and high water, death and dying and life. And I really feel grateful where I'm at right now on the Sunshine Coast and meeting all you wonderful teachers and helpers and guides on this path. And it feels like I'm a baby here, a true baby. I'm 65, and yet it feels like I'm just beginning to walk this good life again, because I've had so many different challenges along the way this past 2 years. And, I'm really grateful for this moment. And that's what I share when I'm with people. We have this moment with each other. Let's enjoy the moments, because those moments sometimes are far and few in between. And my elder said, pay attention wherever you go, whoever you're talking to, give it your all. Because maybe there's something there that you're going to pass on, and that may help them. And somebody's keeping track of my time here. So life has really, really shown me many opportunities on my path. And I've met many medicine men and women all across North America, and some from down South America. And I it's just, I was taught that by a medicine woman. There's going to be so many medicine people showing up in your life. There's going to be so many different hand songs coming to you for hand drumming. And you're going to be teaching so many people on your path. And I'm looking at them, sure. And I look at the Sunshine Coast, and we made over 400 hand drums in a few years. And my gratitude for St. Hilda is for opening the door for drumming in there. And it's so beautiful and so peaceful and so meditative that 1 hour is not enough when you're drumming, when people are really embracing, feeling that heartbeat. And that's what my journey has really been all about, is feeling that heartbeat and enjoying life, even in its darkest moments, or losing a loved one. There's always a brighter side to that. And so I'm really grateful that my elders and medicine people have taught me to really be aware mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, to what's going on all around me, within me, and to do something good with it. And that feels good. It really feels good to be here. There's so much. I want to lift my pipe up for you and saying, here it is. I send my blessings to you. Here's a song. Here's a smudge. But I'm also cognizant of other cultures. I'm part of the Sechelt Nation now, and walking hand in hand with the nation here. And I really feel blessed that they keep saying, Coyote, we need you. We need you. And, I love that. And just like being with you guys, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Hearing you talk, Terry, I know your story fairly well, because we've been friends for 15, 20 years, something like that. And but throughout what you've told us, you continually reinforce the value of the elders in your life, their teaching, their leadership, their guidance, their inspiration. And I see in you eldership for all those whom you come in contact with, all those whom you meet when you're stocking shelves at the grocery store, or just being around with the Sechelt Nation, or here at St. Hilda's and the drumming. But it also reinforces to me the importance of eldership in all of us, being able to reach out for those who are babies on their journeys and stepping up into is it the responsibility? I don't know. We can discuss this a bit more later on tonight, but thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that up to us.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is joining us from Barbados, Dr. Michael Clark, the principal of Codrington College. And Michael is going to talk about spirituality in the Christian context. So Michael, take it away, please.
Great. Thank you very much. If I can just share my screen a little bit with you. Good evening, and thanks to all the organizers for this invitation to participate in this series. I'm going to try to get through it before I fall asleep, given my time here. And it's been really good to listen this evening to the other presenters, especially loved, enjoyed listening to Coyote. I could listen to him all night. I could give him my time. But one of the things that as we come tonight to talk about the Christian spiritual tradition, your question how various traditions address the question of spirituality and meditation. The thing about our Christian tradition is that one of the things that we find ourselves faced with is the multiplicity of it all. So in going into this subject, it's crucial for us to recognize that spirituality, in essence, addresses how particular people or culture understand themselves as it relates to the all that is. And listening to Coyote just now, you could hear that coming through very powerfully. So it is in general a sense of what is beyond the visible, what is not seen. And so as persons seek to understand this reality, they move to the hidden, but they begin with the known. And the latter then is revealed and not discovered. So it's in a real sense dependent on the higher choosing to permit the devotee to see, to participate. And so in this very awareness is right here that we confront our first challenge, as it were, with the concept of Christian spirituality. Christianity, being a global religion, has in many ways been an imposition on various cultures. And it is only in the very recent past that such cultures are awakening and shaking off the sleep of complete acceptance, and recognizing that while the Christian message may be universal, its stifling of self-understanding of a people is contrary to spiritual growth. That sense of becoming a self before God. And so each manifestation of the human is descent, as it were, from the realm of spirit into a particular human physical experience. The place is selected for the unique experience. The incarnation, having been accomplished, then begins the work of the homeward journey out of the unique context. We are reminded that Jesus incarnated as a Jew and began his homeward journey out of that context. And so it's regretful in a sense that in a desire to conquer, many Christian colonizers saw it fit to superimpose the culture, ignoring the experience and the journey of those who are being colonized. And so awareness of this reality has become visible in many places, and various communities are beginning to take steps to rediscover that sense of themselves as it relates to their understanding of God. And so this, for me, is an important thinking, that we are able to find a way to rediscover ourselves. And so this presentation is shaped in this manner to acknowledge that there is no one Christian spirituality. For years, persons might have been led to assume that there was only one. But all across Christendom, the lives of the saints shared, and persons were invited to emulate such men and women of God. And very little was shared, however, of the methodology employed to attain the levels they did. The requirement was primarily to follow the saints. And so you can see from this, when you say Christian spirituality, the question is which part, which one, which particular manifestation. But be that as it may, with such a background, Christian spirituality can be viewed with an awareness of the disconnect in parts that might, in some respects, hamper the effort to speak on this topic. So in looking at Christian spirituality, it is necessary to begin with Jesus. Here we see the essentials of what Christian spirituality is or is intended to be. In the Jesus story, as shared by various canonical and non-canonical writers, we see an awareness of the oneness of God and the desire that all should share in that oneness. Jesus' high priestly prayer in John 17 says that they may be one as he and the Father are one. And this encapsulates his entire understanding of the relationship between God and man. In some circles, many of the statements he made concerning himself are better interpreted as being available to all persons. Things like when he speaks of being the Son of Man and the attributes that he connects with that. And so in the early days, we find with Jesus' example, the followers set out. And that post-ascension of Christ, witnessed and experienced by his followers, which they refer to as the coming of the Holy Spirit. This shift in consciousness became the determining factor in being a person of the way for those early followers. Paul makes reference to the Spirit, especially to correct the error of one-upmanship. But one witnesses over time a shift from the early days of Spirit focus, where deeds of power were a significant component, to a later focus of the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. But for the most part, Christian spirituality, as witnessed by this side of the world, comes out of the English church and focused greatly on remembrance of the saints of the church and devotion to those who had led the way. In many ways, spirituality became prayer book based and as such communal. So the shared experience of the individual of the past was used to facilitate the nurturing of the community. Shrines, processions, and devotions before the former invited the faithful to revere the saints. The efforts at personal growth and transformation would have, for the most part, taken such forms. And using the prayer book as guiding, such as the seasons within the context of the church's year, Lent and Advent, would have been times of devotion and preparation for the celebration of the upcoming feast. One can see that the focus in much of these efforts was clearly church-centered and not necessarily person-centered. Much of this has changed in recent times, and it began not by the authorities giving permission, but in some ways, a younger, newer community being exposed to other pathways and challenging the powers that be. Example, in 1996, a young man by the name of Mark Iaconelli, who served as co-director of what was called the Youth Ministry and Spirituality Project, which was funded by the Eli Lilly Foundation, endowed a program which introduced contemplative spirituality to young people throughout the country. He was at the time an adjunct professor of youth ministry at San Francisco Theological Seminary. And reports coming out of the project confirmed that the youth were more than receptive to this new avenue of Christianity, something they had not experienced or heard of before. And this leads us into what we would have in recent times begun to hear more and more about: the contemplative life of the church. And this, in many ways, we're told, began when there was a rediscovery of a text entitled The Cloud of Unknowing, written in the 1300s, the work of a monk who sought to guide a particular novice. And this text has in recent times been rediscovered and has been used by the West to bring in a new period where meditation and contemplation are being made available to average persons and not simply to those in cloistered halls. It's therefore only in the mid to late 20th century that Christian spirituality became more person-focused for individuals who were not in religious orders. And so one would be aware that in recent times, the work of persons like the late Thomas Keating and Cynthia Bourgeault has seen the revival and expansion of meditation and contemplation as a way of being for the average person. The idea of the small self or the ego self, which needs to be disciplined, that it might serve the individual as intended, would have emerged out of disciplines such as psychology and proponents such as James Fowler with his work on stages of faith. That faith has stages is a recent understanding and therefore has contributed greatly to the sense of personal responsibility for one's spiritual growth. Thomas Keating tells the story of encountering the Buddhists, and when they shared with him their methods for assisting persons in dealing with what one may call the false self, Keating was then asked, what methods does his religion use? And he reluctantly at this time said, none. Persons like Thomas Keating have sought to place spirituality back into the equation and offer a tool for the growing or deepening of that spirituality. And during the development of centering prayer, he borrowed from psychology to indicate what he called programs for happiness, which, while of some value in earlier times, would be now outgrown for the individual and as such hampered the spiritual growth process. His message then sought to encourage persons to practice this form of prayer as a way of dismantling their internal, what he called software. So we find ourselves with centering prayer, basically a sacred word that is identified, no great power in this particular word, just the word that seeks to bring one's attention back when one drifts off in one's focus. And this sacred word is not repeated like a mantra, but it is used only when necessary to bring one's attention back to one's purpose or one's intention of being in the presence of the divine. Thomas Keating offers the analogy too that was offered earlier of being like a diver at the bottom of the ocean, and the thoughts are like boats passing on the surface, and the diver looks up and sees a boat, the hull of a boat passing by, and just out of interest might swim up to investigate, but then comes back down to his original spot at the depth of the ocean. And he says that this is more like our thoughts, where in centering prayer we may look at a thought and notice a thought, but the thing is not to adhere oneself to the thought, but to be able to let it go. And so persons like Cynthia Bourgeault offers a few, what she calls the 4 R's: resist no thought, react to no thought, retain no thought, and always return to the sacred word. And then in recent times, the idea of lectio divina had resurfaced again for persons. And this is an old tradition, but it's been now brought back into play in so many ways. And it has basically the 4 movements of lectio, reading, and then there's a meditating on that reading after the reading, a very short passage. After one reads a few times to reflect on that. And then there is a moment of response, oratio, where one is able to speak out loud and all the thoughts that might arise out of that time of meditation. And then the final opportunity to rest within the context of that wonderful time of peace, that stillness. It is here in that rest, this is where the engagement really begins. It is here that the author of the Cloud of Unknowing begins his focus. All that has gone before is simply in an effort to bring us into this arena. So when you consider it, our prayer life hardly ever takes us there. And if it does, it is perceived as an end and not a beginning. With Lectio Divina, when we come into that place of stillness, that is where the engagement really begins. And these two methodologies have been really promoted in recent times within Christian tradition as tools for individuals to work with in developing their journey and their walk in grace. But moving forward, it appears that there's a new spirituality emerging, one that no longer depends on the gatekeepers for permission to exist, but it is spreading among the youth who have incarnated in a totally different environment with access to other faith traditions. Youth are borrowing heavily from other paths and recognizing that no one path has all the answers. Hence, while one may undertake to propose that the practices of Christian spirituality are somewhat limited in reality, they are far wider, as many Christians practice in various methodologies to enhance their experience of the divine. The world in which we live is a world that is tremendously open and engaging, and our cultures, our practices are interweaving. And at the end of the day, we find ourselves with greater and greater experiences of what God is doing in our lives, through us, to us, and with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. It's fascinating hearing you talking about being on the way, you know, that image of walking along with our faith, along with our leader. As Christians, we see Jesus as being our leader, and particularly from this year's reading in the lectionary, the book of Luke, where it's all about being on the way, and you expanded that into the way of being, and it's I would suggest that's certainly what's brought this congregation to where we are now, through the way of being with each other and the way of being on our journey together. So thank you for your outline there of the various ways in which Christian spirituality can lead us to be on the way. But a year and a half ago, I signed up for a course at Vancouver School of Theology, and it was a course on various spiritual practices. And one of the lecturers for a weekend was Shinman Michael Newton. So Michael, it's great to have you with us again this week to talk about the Buddhist practices and Buddhist spirituality and meditation practices that lead you into your way of being. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much. And I just want to thank the presenters that I've heard so far. I'm deeply moved to hear the various ways we can approach the spiritual life. I also just wanted to say I'm so grateful that we are talking about this right now. I feel, given this time that we've experienced the last 2 years of COVID, given the terrible crisis that's going on in the Ukraine, we need these practices, because these practices will ground us and allow us to face whatever is coming forward in our life, rather than escaping in some way or ignoring. So, well, there are many Buddhist spiritual practices, and I would love to spend the next couple of hours talking about them. But I'm going to focus on the meditation practice and on questioning. as two key practices that are in my own life. I've noticed when people come to the meditation practice, and maybe this is true of you, people come because they're suffering. People come because they have a profound question that is not answered easily. Unfortunately, those self-help books don't quench the thirst. We need a profound practice. In our Zen tradition, the particular tradition that I'm connected with, our Zen tradition is really not that interested in answers. Rather, questions are valued. Because answers kind of quickly become static, right? Got it, finish that. But questions are full of energy. Questions kind of pull us into unexplored areas, breaking open our limited understanding. As was mentioned earlier, I taught religious studies for a number of years at a local university. One of the books I used a lot was a book called Night by Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Peace Prize winner and a survivor of the Holocaust. Near the beginning of that book, Moshe the beetle is introduced. And the beetle is someone who is kind of a caretaker of a synagogue or a church. It's an old word. But Moshe is also a practitioner of the Kabbalah. And Moshe explains to young Wiesel, because Wiesel is just basically, this book is a very kind of, it's not exactly an autobiography, but it's very close to an autobiography of what Elie Wiesel experienced during the war. Anyway, Moshe explains to the young Wiesel that every question possessed a very strong power that's lost once we get the answer. And when Moshe was asked, well, why do you pray? Why do you come to the synagogue and pray every day? Moshe answered this: I pray to the God within me for the strength to ask the real questions. I pray to the God within me to ask the real questions. And I have always thought, isn't this true of all of us? While we may come to a spiritual practice or a spiritual place, kind of seeking peace of mind or relief from anxiety, if we stay long enough at the practice, ultimately we come to ask the real questions of our life. In our Zen tradition, we have these questions like, what is your face before your parents were born? What is your original nature? What's the sound of one hand? These are the kinds of questions we find in the old Zen literature, the kind of questions that a Zen teacher may ask a student, a committed student who's coming to practice. But these are just culturally adapted to the culture that they arose in. And when we come and to ask them more personally, they take the form of like, who am I? Who am I? What is this life? Where is my true home? And it's questions like these kind of deep and seemingly unanswerable questions that I think really link us to our greater life, the true vastness of our life. Because at some point in this practice, we recognize that we have been mostly trying to live the story of what a good life is supposed to be, rather than meeting our life as it is. And hopefully we begin to intuit there's something greater than the story we've been told about what the good life is. And yet we may not know what that is. And we begin to question. And in this way, through a direct or through a more wandering path, we come to the quiet sitting practice, the practice of silence and the practice of solitude. Now, I think it's impossible to meditate for any length of time without really noticing suffering, our own suffering, the suffering of our heart, and the suffering of the world. But as our mindfulness, our awareness develops over time, I think our heart also becomes big enough, resilient enough, to really see and understand the great difficulty of this human life. And while meditation may not help us in terms of producing concrete answers like, okay, what do I do with this relationship? How do I handle, this jerk at work? Meditation may not help us with that, but it will give us the courage and give us the strength to do something, even against great odds. It is very powerful that way. So with the meditation practice, however you meditate, I think we grow our capacity for patience, fortitude, compassion, imagination, and love. So month by month, year by year, as we enter into a meditation practice, we become mature, we become kind, we become capable individuals and steadfast in the face of personal injuries, personal troubles. Now, as we've already heard, there are many kinds of meditation. And in the Zen tradition, our style is very simple. It's basically taking an upright posture, torso simply being upright, body relaxed, or whatever, on the cushion, on a chair, whatever works for you. And then bringing your awareness to the body, just feeling what arises right now, acknowledging it, meeting it. Then bringing your awareness to the sensation of breath, wherever you may feel that most vividly, and just returning over and over again to that sense of this moment, meeting your life exactly as it is, without comment, without judgment. And of course, thoughts will arise, emotions will arise, comments will arise, and that's okay. Just come back. Breath, body, here, now. This simple practice, I think, really puts us in a posture of full human dignity. Just sitting this way, with this awareness, we have a sense of our own inherent nobility, meeting our life. Just breathing in, out, body, lungs rising, falling. Sometimes counting might help, or a sound, a word. All of these are very skillful means. And it really doesn't matter what technique you use. It is coming back into this present moment, letting go for a little while of the constant chatter that's going on in your mind, returning to that very basic feeling of being alive, being aware, embodied, breathing. This gentle returning to the present moment of our experience allows our mind and our body to settle. Like the muddy waters of a pond stirred up by a storm settle during the calm of the day. We settle, and gradually we see the wholeness of our life, at least a little more deeply. We begin to see the deeper patterns that control much of our reactions. And perhaps we begin to see the stories that we tell ourselves and the assumptions about our life are not quite true. And we can let them go. Now, there are a lot of books about meditation. A lot has been written about Zen and Buddhist meditation in general. There are many specific techniques that go beyond this simple practice that I just described. But I think meditation more or less comes down to this very basic practice. Essentially, it is nothing more than sitting with an honest awareness of the process of your life. It is a practice of continuous intimacy with the present, And this intimacy shows us that our life is much larger than what we assume it to be. So as you practice quietening the internal noise and opening up to your experience of the present moment, those long established personal barriers become softer, porous. Your own personal stories about the world and your place in it less believable. You become mindful of the vividness of things exactly as they are. And this is liberating. Those cramped places in the heart begin to relax, and they make room for joy. Joy that is our natural inheritance. Now I'm been talking fast and struggling hard to squeeze my talk into the 12 minutes. So much more, of course, to say. But I'll just end by saying, please, everyone, find your way to meditate. Find your way to find that place of stillness within yourself. It is the greatest gift I think you can offer yourself and the world right now. And together, may we bring peace to our hearts, to those around us, into this world, which so desperately needs it right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, I'll tell you that after last week's session, I have this business thing going on, which was just tearing me up. And I heard you and it reminded me of the importance of that quiet sitting practice, the deep breathing, the relaxation of letting go, of emptying, and your description of becoming settled, becoming to see, I can't read my own writing, seeing the wholeness of our lives, seeing the wholeness of who we are to be. So thank you very much for that great reminder, for that great outline of a very simple, accessible practice.
Oh, thank you.
Now, our last panelist tonight is Archbishop Lynn McNaughton, and Lynn and I go back a long way together. It's great to see you, Lynn, and
Good to see you.
thank you very much for joining us from, I'm assuming you're in Kelowna, are you?
I am.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's hear what Lynn has to say.
So, Michael, I had my mute on, so you didn't hear me say amen at the end of what you offered to us. So, thank you to all of the other presenters, and also to. Oh, I realize there's two Michaels. I didn't connect with that, but thank you, Michael Clark, for your very good historical introduction, which means I got to throw out some of the things I was going to say because you have already said it so well. Yes, so I'm in Kelowna on the traditional and unceded territory of the Silks First Nation, which is one of the Okanagan First Nations. I want to say just a little bit about what I understand about wisdom. That sounds crazy, as if yeah, it's the unanswered questions of wisdom, but that the Christian understanding of wisdom rooted in Judaism is that it's both a gift from God and something we can seek. That wisdom in Hebrew scripture is actually personified as a woman who's an uppity woman who's in the streets calling to people to say, seek wisdom. There's a lot of things in life which don't satisfy. Don't waste your time on them. Come and seek wisdom. And the early Christian writers found that a lot of the words that were used to describe this figure of wisdom they had discovered in their experience of Christ. And Jesus himself identifies himself as the wisdom, calling in the streets for people. And So a lot of that language was used that Jesus was with God in the beginning, involved in creation, and that the wisdom is bringing people into friendship with God, or what I think is the purpose of a spiritual life, which is union with the divine, right? That sense of being one and discovering that we are in the image of God is one way that Christians would talk about that. And the Hebrew scripture talks about the beginning of wisdom as being, well, it says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but I think fear of God is not a helpful translation in English. It's more reverence and a sense of awe. And I do think that that is one of the places of beginning to have a proper relationship with the divine and discovering the core of who we are, is to have a sense of awe and wonder. So the contemplative life, several, I think all of the other speakers tonight have said, it's not so much about a technique as a space of, that the mystics in the Christian tradition have shied away from giving very specific directions about how, and some of them might have taught their particular disciples about one way, but they shy away from saying it should look like this, because there's a danger always of getting caught in what the technique is, rather than discovering for ourselves what moves us into communion with the divine. And it's a balance, I think, of community and solitude. The spiritual life has to be both. And a balance between silence and what I would call corporate worship in my tradition, but of being with others, that to look at the mystics, those who've experienced God, it's not about escaping from reality. The spiritual life is to give us energy to engage with life. I think one of the, dare I say, terrible mistakes that Christianity fell into when, Michael Clark was speaking earlier about the colonization and the failure to see that that all of Christian spiritual life has to be indigenized. It needs to be in the culture, not escape from. And so our first colonization, I think, unfortunately, was with the Greeks, who had such a mind-body dualism. And I think, thankfully, we're in some recovery from that sense of dualism, that our bodies were something we had to escape in order to have a spiritual life, rather than to say, in gratitude and awe and wonder, we are embodied people, and we live life in this body, and creation is good, our bodies are good, and the spiritual life is lived within and in that body. So it's not trying to escape from that. It's to bring energy and being in the present, being awake. So that's what the purpose of a spiritual life is, to be awake to the moment, and to, I think, to move us out in compassion and justice making in the world, the peacemaking that you were speaking about. So I think the other recovery, and Michael Clark mentioned this, the other recovery of healthier spiritual practice in Christianity is to say it's not for a few special people. It's not for the mystics or the religious vocations. It's for everyone, all Christians, and that relationship with God is a calling for all of us. I guess the other thing I would want to say, maybe to deepen the word, we all use different words around contemplation, silent prayer and meditation. And I see meditatio, the word in one of the Psalms, Psalm 19, translated the meditations of our hearts, is actually the Hebrew word for Haggah. It's the word for chewing on your cud. It's the cow. It's the rumination would be a better word to translate that than meditation. So it has a sense of a lion guarding its new catch and growling away in its cave, like just murmuring and groaning. And there's even a sense in the word for meditation of plotting, right? It's taking some word, it's scripture word, a wisdom, a piece of wisdom, and chewing on it so that it becomes part of who you are, to ruminate over God's word. So meditating in that sense is not sitting in silence, but much more an act of pondering, a ratio of talking to others about it, engaging it so that it starts to affect our life, to chew on it and figure out what it means for us. It's quite an active word. And then when we've done that kind of rumination, then to have silence, so, to absorb it in that way and to let go. So there's that active, there's an active focus, and then there's an emptying. And that's the fancy Greek words I was saying I should have put up on slides, but I didn't. But so cataphatic prayer, meaning prayer that has content, to focus on a candlelight, to walk out in nature as a way of quieting ourselves and focusing on awe and wonder. I mean, I know from my own experience, that's where I need that in my spiritual life. I need to be out in nature. I need that sense of the wonder of God's creation, and I need that connection embodied. And then, so that's a cataphatic type of prayer, to look at symbols or words or images, and ideas, and then to move out of that into apophatic, which is emptying, prayer that has no content. And that several people have described that so well tonight about the what's floating on the surface, and then to go deep down, to dive as a scuba diver does. I've done only a little scuba diving, but enough to know that glorious silence when you go down deep under the water. And so emptying our minds of the words and ideas and simply resting in the present moment. So that's centering prayer of the apophatic prayer. And I think we need both. And the language from different traditions may be different, but that letting go and emptying and silence. Michael Clark mentioned Cynthia Bourgeault, and I was at a retreat she led, and she was talking about Thomas Keating, when a woman went up to Thomas Keating and said, every time I try to meditate, I have 1,000 images that come into my brain, the grocery list, and he said, it's the returning. You had 1,000 opportunities to return to the present. And that's been a very helpful image for me. It's because the grocery list, of course, appears. The flotsam and the jetsam going over our heads, and just letting it be. And that is such the word that comes to mind right now is it's such a relief to do that letting go in the midst of the bombardment we have in our society, and the noise and the phones and all of the so I think I'm heading way over my time now too, so I think there's my timer. See, I, yeah, I think that's where I would want to leave it. Glorious to have this discussion of different traditions. I'm Michael Ingham, the former bishop of the Diocese of New Westminster, said that when it comes to interfaith dialogue, what will always bring us together are the mystics, the people who know from experience the divine. Yeah, a bunch of theological head dialogue will get us only to a certain point.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, you may look like a bunch of talking heads on this presentation, but the wisdom that comes out of all of you is wonderful. I was particularly taken, Lynn, by the comment that you said specifically the integration of mind and body, and I think you meant also soul was in there to lead us into a spiritual life that brings us alive and awake at the moment. I was fascinated by that description, which has resonated through everyone else's as well, and the sort of the consistency of well, the consistency that is apparent no matter where we come from in our lives when we're exploring in this way. The other thing that really resonated with me, maybe it's because I'm a deacon, is that one of the main purposes of this is to move us out so that we can be compassion in the world. There's a purpose behind all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a mistake, unfortunately, to have spirituality seem like an escape from the world rather than a way to enter more deeply into it.
Thank you. This now brings us to a point where panelists can ask each other questions. Now, Michael Clark has disappeared. Steve. Okay, Steve is looking for him. So Steve, I'm going to ask you if you can turn your mic on. I'm going to go and get the portable mic while you're doing that. Okay, well, that's fine. Okay, you get the portable. You'll need a battery. Thanks. So any of you panelists, do you have something you wanted to ask or say or challenge or approve of or affirm to someone else? Yes, Michael Nugent.
Yeah, thank you. In the Zen tradition, as I mentioned, the role of questioning is one of the key spiritual practices. And I'm wondering, maybe I'll just start with Lynn, but I'd also like to hear from Coyote, is there a similar role in the Christian tradition and indigenous traditions, this kind of deep personal questioning and really holding on to that question as almost like an anchor?
No. I loved what you said about like living into the question, and answers can be temporary, but that's not really what that the purpose is to ask the right question. I'm not going to remember the quote exactly, but Rainier Marie Rilke talks about that the task is to ask the right question. I actually think I've been known to say that Jesus' parables are Zen. Like they're there to tease you, and there isn't a right answer. And every time you go back to a parable, there's something new jumps out at you. So it's that kind of teaching that leaves you. Maybe that's why I like the rumination, the chewing your cud image. It's like you have to chew on it, and there isn't an answer necessarily, but the purpose is to chew on it.
Coyote, do you want to chime in on that?
It's a good question. Under the guidance of all elders and medicine men that have ever worked with me, do you have a question, grandson? And I look at them. What do you want me to ask? I'm here to learn from you. And they said, well, sometimes people want to start anew on this journey, they'll have 10,000 questions. And do you have a question? And I look at them and I'd say, no, because I'm going to learn whatever I can from any words or any wisdom or any ceremonies that you share with me. That I'm here as an observer, and if I have a question, then I will ask. But in the meantime, all my elders said, when you're a pupil learning on this path, you can ask a million questions and a million answers will come at you. The one that sticks with you is the one that you feel in your heart and your spirit. So when the right question is asked, you'll know it and feel it and say, thank you. There we go. That's a good question. And so there is time and place in ceremonies that I've witnessed and been a part of for 35 years of my sobriety. So I've seen a lot of medicine people on this journey. And I just feel blessed to be part of your guys' journey now. Thank you.
Okay. How about Marlena or Michael Clark? Do you have something you want to ask one of the others or comment on?
It's been a very invigorating, great to hear different people's ways of contacting spirit in that deep place. What I have found in having this practice of easily going within myself with the meditation TM, that sometimes when I go deeper, my mind is really, like you say, Lynn, sometimes it's just way on the surface like a tsunami storm, and then it just, the natural tendency to go within and I just let it happen. And then sometimes questions arise out of that place, I have found, as I kind of get out of the scatter of the riffraff, then, and I get quiet. I'm very grateful for an ability, maybe like being in nature sometimes, for the questions to emerge that I need to look at that moment. So I have found that sometimes my deepest questions will come when I actually get quiet, and then my soul or spirit will bring something forward. It's like, and so then I contemplate it. I sit with it in that deep, quiet place. And sometimes it goes away. Like some peace comes over me and it answers itself. So I was wondering, does that happen to some of you sometimes when you're in a turmoil place? I love the Zen place where you come back to the body and the breathing. I like to do that too. How do you come back to that? How does it emerge for you? I'm curious from Michael
Clark.
The deep Christian tradition. How does it come to you when you're with a question? Your talk was rich. How do you work with that?
Well, for the most part, one of the things that I've found in the journey, the whole area of the question, is that the question creates an avenue of openness. And one of the downsides of some of the Christian faith traditions is a sense of we've got it nailed down. We know it, and it is this way. And my group says it's this way, or your group says it's that way, and therefore we put fences around it. The thing about the question for me is that the question does the opposite. The question creates an opening, and it invites all, right? The bishop mentioned that whole thing of fear, but it's more, as Fred already said, it's more awe that we're talking about, where there is this openness to what is this, and because one has a sense of the journey, and I think one of my strong aspects for me in this Christian tradition is a sense of the journey. The journey is a very powerful motif for me because it speaks to, okay, this is what I know now, but as I continue, I shall know more, and it is forever shifting. It is almost like you never reach. It is as you get to where you thought it was, it moves, and it urges you on, and is that continual moving forward. because, you know, when you think about it, when you sit and you think about it from a realistic perspective, you're here trying to understand the mind of God. And you know, we can't even understand our own minds together in a gathering far as the mind of God. So the sense of having it nailed down is really counterproductive to the spiritual journey. So it's that sense of openness. So the question for me is, okay, here's the question, and I can ruminate to the question, because I can look at the question from various perspectives and see what answers arise in this moment. And in being more specific there in terms of that sense of coming back to center, I have found that more and more there's a need to find what I call for friends, I call it a home base, right? And for me, there is this sense that you need to have a home base from which you go out into the world, and to which you come back in at the end of a period, so that you can reset, you can renew, you can begin again. For many people in our world who don't engage in things in meditation and contemplative prayer, etc., they're forever going out. It is a continuous going out, and there's no returning home for renewal, for restart. And so persons are stressed, persons are, you know, at the wit's end, etc., because there is this, no one says to them, you should go home. And you know, one of the things that we fail to see is as the whole idea of as without, so within. Because if you look at the world around you, and you look at life in the external, you know that, you know, the morning comes and I get up and I prepare myself and I go out to work. I go out to the various activities of the day. The night comes, whenever that is, the night comes and I return home. I come back to my home. I renew, I rest, I recover, and I prepare for the next day to go again. Mm-hmm. And if you take that motif, this external motif, and realize, well, the internal stuff works just the same. There is that need for that place where I call home within, which I need to discover and know where it is, so that in the midst of the turmoil, I can find a home. And if I can just use a quick example of Jesus within that little story of Jesus in the boat, and there's a storm out there and everybody's going frantic, and Jesus is asleep because he knows where that home base is. And it is out of that home base when everybody says, get up, you know, we are perishing. And Jesus comes out of that place of peace. And because he's in a place of peace, he speaks to the turmoil and invites the turmoil into a place of peace. And there's peace. The disciples couldn't do that because they were already in the place of being frantic and could not command peace. But one has to find one's peace. And if one is able to find one's peace, then one is able to speak to the world from a place of peace and invite the world into peace.
That's beautiful.
I just want to say one thing. This is quick. Because I work with bodies a lot and healing, I had this thought based on what you're saying, that in Jesus, really, how do we experience extreme turmoil, duality, and this deep silence at once? And I thought, being a human being is an embodied paradox.
Yeah.
That is what it means to be a full human being. Like, we embody both at stillness, and we can have that at once. And we are like wired to do that.
Yeah.
And that just fascinates me.
Yeah. We have a few minutes for questions from our audience. And if you're here in the church, Steve has a portable microphone, which will get you to use so others can hear. And if you're on Zoom, just use the raise hand function or wave frantically so that Steve can see you, or just speak up.
Speak really close because it's not a super great mic.
I love the consideration around asking the right question. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, and my study today was around asking the right question, and how important it is to ask the right question, because in doing that, a holy instant, if you ask the right question, there's a holy instant and God speaks to you. And in the teachings of today was around the right question relates to really being absolutely as open without any ideas of wishes or desires, and getting aware of how our beliefs can stand in the way. And in being fully opened, it leaves an avenue for the divine to speak.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very insightful.
Really close again. So
Thank you for this opportunity and for your presentations. I've practiced a Jesuit style of spirituality for 3 decades now, I guess. My essential question is the problem of evil. Is that an objective reality? Is it a subjective understanding? How do you deal with that? Jesus dealt with that. We're modern people. We don't think of a satanic character with a tail and so on. But we all face the reality of evil in our world and in our lives, and that force that poses against intimacy. How do you understand it? Be interested in the Buddhist response to that question.
thank you.
A very powerful question, and one I'm sure it's on many people's minds these days. There are several views about that question. I think, though, the most fundamental question is that, evil is not something separate. Evil is not something outside of ourselves. That what creates great harm, traditionally in Buddhism, is known as the greed, hate, and ignorance. That these 3 things can cause us to commit acts that are terribly harmful to others. Thich Nhat Hanh, the recently died, the great Vietnamese Zen teacher, has always said in his teachings that he recognizes that he is capable of doing the most horrendous acts, that within each of us, that possibility lies. But our spiritual practice is cultivating those qualities within us that cultivate the good, the practices that allow us to be fully alive in the world by offering love, compassion, tenderness, and joy. But evil as a separate force, evil as something that is outside, no. Evil or those kind of acts, I think, are potentially within all of us. And given what conditioning we had, given the circumstances that we may find ourselves in, that we are all capable of doing evil acts. Although in Buddhism, we wouldn't call them evil, but we'd call them harmful, that which causes harm. I have a little bit trouble with the word evil, and just because it has such a Judeo-Christian focus, and in Asian traditions, it's not there. Again, the focus is on doing harm as opposed to offering good. So a few words. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Michael. Do we have questions from Zoom, Steve?
Nobody is indicated.
Do we
I
have-
see any hands up for Zoomers?
Do we have any other questions from the church here? No?
Yes,
Oh.
ma'am. Close as you know.
We've got one coming here.
Yeah, I appreciate your question, just the previous question. I'd like to have more answers to that question about evil. No, just your thoughts on how you are viewing our world.
Thank you.
Well, what do you think? It's evil, such a challenging topic, isn't it? Who's going to be brave?
Yeah, I was thinking, oh, good.
Yeah. Okay.
Michael Newton's answered it so well. The rest of us can
Yeah.
just nothing like
mean,
opening
that-
up a
Yeah.
huge topic, right? Yeah, there's a sense of, I mean, I do like the language of doing no harm. Do no harm. I mean, I think the whole wisdom of scripture that vengeance belongs to God and the call to righteousness, which I translate, I think, in my own self as right relationship, which to me means no harm to others. And yet there's also, so to say that vengeance belongs to God is to say we are not to be trying to take out on others when we see something wrong happening, but and I also see it as always not projecting it out onto others, not to take not to project the evil onto someone else or to another group, as we often do, but to own it within myself, that I am capable of harm. So not to be in a position of judging others. And then I think, I mean, the situation with Ukraine right now puts us into a whole kind of a different realm of corporate responsibility. I want further conversation with Michael Newton about the word evil, because that got me thinking lots. But what I would say is corporate evil. You know, Christianity tends to focus way too much on personal and often sexual sin or something that the others are doing, rather than what are we capable as human beings together. And I mean, the destruction of our planet is also that. I mean, I have responsibility with myself, and yet there's also, I'm caught in a system that is greedy and a system that is destructive of the earth. And so there's something about personal and corporate in there that's tricky. How do we respond when one yeah, I'm only thinking of judgmental words, but when a megalomaniac invades another country, how do we respond to that? Yeah, I don't have any answers about that. Yeah.
If I could just weigh in here for a bit on the whole.
Yeah. Sure, please, Michael. We'll have Michael Clark will have the last word here tonight.
There is one more question.
Oh, there is? Okay.
Yeah, you have.
Right. No, I was just saying that the thing with evil, and Michael quite rightly points out that it has a lot of Judeo-Christian baggage that comes with it. And you know, even something with this is the season of Lent, and the whole issue of Jesus being tempted by Satan. And I think we've lost somewhere along the line the whole notion of personification, and the fact that these are just concepts that were given to help persons to have a sense of what's being said, but they have fossilized over the years. And so rather than recognizing that dual nature within the self, where one can choose one way or another, because we live in a dualistic experience, we tend to project out of ourselves the things that we don't really want to associate or don't like. And therefore, this thing called evil now is some separate and distinct entity out there that has nothing to do with me. If anything, it can attack me, as opposed to my realizing that it's within me, that choice is within me, And therefore, if I see it being manifested, it's not because something outside has done me something, but that I have chosen. I have chosen to use my potential in a way that causes harm. And so that sense of ownership becomes important. And in a time when we are focusing more and more on the individual responsibility, I think these are the times where we need to bring that home and stop projecting it out into some entity, but realize that I must be responsible for my choices, and that goes into so many different areas of life.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Diane Marshall has a question.
Diane Marshall, let's hear from you. Can you
Hi.
speak to her? Yeah.
It's been such a wonderful discussion. Thanks to each one of you. I really, really have appreciated it. My background in being a counseling psychologist, I did a lot of reading and work in the area of Jungian and dream interpretation. I think it's important. Something he said was really important about the collective unconscious and the fact that images rise that come unbidden to the individual, but that are actually part of a collective awareness. And he talked about the fact that he had many patients prior to World War II breaking out, prior to the Nazi takeover of Europe, many patients who used similar images that had to do with war, that had to do with creating an other who becomes then the enemy that you know. And so this personal responsibility you're all just talking about, I think we have to always perhaps be mindful that there's a collective energy that can be a force of good and it can be a force of evil. And people almost have a sense, and I've worked with people who were former prisoners who had been child abusers, who would describe the power of using some sort of internet type of way of getting it, feeling they're part of a collective that are all doing this together, as a justification for losing their own sense of personal conscience. So I guess this is sort of a I don't know how to ask the question, I apologize, but it has to do with the fact that a corporate sense of evil, which takes over the personal capacity to choose. And what that's all about. Because to me, that's there's something dangerous that can happen here.
I think maybe what we should do is let us all stew on that question rather than trying to have an answer tonight. We reached the end of our allotted time, and I don't want to keep people longer than we said we would. But I think it's an excellent observation, Diana. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's see what we can do with that as a community of wisdom seekers. I'd like to extend a very, very heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists tonight, to Marlena, to Michael Newton, to Terry Coyote Aleck, to Michael Clark, and to Lynn McNaughton. It's just been a wonderful evening, and it's amazing the sense of I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just awareness or of what is possible when we really intentionally enter into a time of exploration. Let me tell you what's happening next week. We are seeking wisdom and the environment next week. And our panelists are a variety. We have Laurel Laurel Dahill, who's a priest from the Fraser Valley, Ron Berzan, who's a deacon from Powell River, an expert on permaculture, a young man, 22, I believe he is. He's a Sikh named Abhay Sechelt, student at University of Toronto. Fascinating fellow. Coyote will be back, and we'll be rounded out with Kate McCandless. The moderator is going to be a guest as well. And if you are an aficionado of CBC, the debaters, you will know this name. It's Charlie Demare, who will be coming and being our moderator next week. So make sure you're here. We'll be back in the church hall, and you're welcome to join us on Zoom as well. May this week be a blessing to all of us. May we experience and be, filled, be mindful of what we've heard and talked about tonight. And in turn, may we be a blessing to those we encounter in our week ahead. Thank you and good night.
All right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Oh, thank you.